Hello and welcome to my channel, dear viewers. Today, I'll be sharing two chilling stories that shocked even seasoned detectives. We'll dive into dark and terrifying events that truly happened, nothing made up by an AI. Make yourselves comfortable. It's going to be both scary and fascinating. On July 30th, 2016, police stormed a house in Yongju, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. Inside, they found a 40-year-old man named Park and a woman whose identity remained undisclosed. The primary target of the operation was Park. However, as officers attempted to detain him, the woman beside him stepped forward in his defense. She aggressively pushed the officers away and shouted, "What are you doing in the presence of God? Remove your hands immediately!" The mention of God in her outburst left no doubt. She was entirely brainwashed by this self-proclaimed cult leader, Park. Let's go back a year to 2015. At that time, Park had no steady job and was financially dependent on his parents. The reason behind his unemployment lay in his criminal history: 8 convictions that made it nearly impossible for him to secure work. Park's parents, devout Christians, spent their days in church, praying fervently for God to give their son a chance at a new life. It seems their desperation found an unusual outlet. One day, Park began claiming he had received a divine revelation. He started referring to himself as the living God and demanded to be addressed accordingly. This was neither a miracle nor an answer to their prayers, just the product of Park's delusional fantasies. Yet for reasons that defy explanation, his parents soon began to believe him. They genuinely came to see their son as someone imbued with divine power, capable of performing miracles. In their eyes, he ceased to be their son. He became a god. Consumed by this twisted faith, Park's parents went to their church to share the true nature of their son with others. However, most of the congregation, horrified by their claims, dismissed their words outright, labeling the parents as delusional. But among the congregation, there was one person who succumbed to their dangerous rhetoric. It was a 48-year-old woman named Kim. Kim had her own reasons for trusting Park's parents. She had known them for a long time, and during difficult times, they had often helped her with household chores. Over time, a warm, friendly bond had developed between them. Whether out of naivety or lingering gratitude, Kim began supporting Park and even agreed to meet him in person. The self-proclaimed cult leader had already learned everything about her life through his parents. At their meeting, he played the role of an all-knowing deity. "I know everything about you. You are like this, aren't you? And also like that, right?" Kim became yet another victim of Park's deception. She believed every word he said, exclaiming, "Oh God, the Lord himself has descended upon you." Her faith grew stronger with each passing day, as if she had been granted some special gift. According to experts, most cult victims are individuals with dependent personalities. Leaders of such groups skillfully exploit human vulnerability and the deep desire for an unwavering source of support. They begin by offering comfort and instilling confidence, slowly introducing their ideas, and eventually gaining total control. Once a victim reaches this state, breaking free from the cult's influence becomes nearly impossible. This is exactly what happened to Kim. She began to see Park as a god and devoted herself entirely to serving him. However, the guru's influence didn't stop there. Before long, Kim began sharing her newfound faith in Park with her closest family members, her elder sister and younger brother. "God has come to us to save us. We must believe in our leader and find salvation," she would proclaim. The irony of the situation lay in the fact that Kim and her siblings were known to be deeply devout Christians. They believed their lives were part of a divine plan, followed religious teachings, and strove for entry into heaven. Yet despite the strength of their previous faith, it took very little time for them to shift their devotion to Park. This unsettling ease of transition reveals the terrifying power of cult influence. By September 2015, the Kim family's faith in Park had solidified to such an extent that he began taking active steps to exploit them. His first move was to isolate the family from the outside world. For instance, he told Kim, "If you stay with your husband, he will die because of you." These words, spoken with the air of a prophecy, became an unshakable truth for Kim. Terrified, she immediately left her husband. Afterward, she moved into the same house as Park, his wife, her own sister, and Park's parents. Her younger brother, who worked in another city, did not join this strange communal living arrangement, but his connection with the family gradually weakened. Thus began the peculiar shared life of these 6 individuals. It was at this point that Park revealed his true nature. Park completely dominated Kim's sister, turning her life into a nightmare. He not only controlled her every move, but also subjected her to systematic abuse. One of his methods of discipline was depriving her of sleep. He allowed her no more than 2 hours of rest each day, forcing her to spend the remaining hours either listening to his sermons or praying. During his teachings, the women were forced to stand still in a pious posture. If they failed to maintain this position, he accused them of lacking faith or being possessed by Satan. Such accusations were followed by beatings, which grew increasingly brutal. A towering, powerful man, standing 1.80 meters tall and weighing up to 160 kilograms, Park used his fists to strike the women, grabbed them by their hair, and slammed their heads against the walls. His cruelty extended to outright torture. On one occasion, he forced the sisters to sit naked on the blade of a knife, threatening that this would purify their souls. This could not be called teaching or faith. It was pure violence. But Park's crimes did not end there. He established a so-called charitable organization, claiming it was his way of bringing light to the world and spreading faith. In reality, he used the organization as a means to extort money from his followers. While the exact amount he took from the Kim sisters remains unknown, police estimate it exceeded 2 billion won. 2 months of communal living turned into a true hell for Kim and her sister. They endured constant beatings, malnutrition, and sleep deprivation, which led to severe physical and psychological trauma. Their wounds went untreated, resulting in infections and festering. Their bodies became so emaciated that, especially in the case of Kim's sister, weakness reduced her to a state where she could no longer control even her basic bodily functions. And then, on the night of April 11th, 2017, tragedy struck. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Park began yet another of his sermons. Present in the room were Kim, her sister, and Park's wife. The sermon dragged on for an unbearable 8 hours. The women stood, trying to endure the torment. But at some point, Kim's sister simply collapsed to the floor. Park exploded with rage. "You? How dare you fall during a sacred sermon? Do you want to live?" he screamed at Kim's unconscious sister, who lay trembling weakly on the floor, unable to respond. Her lack of reaction only fueled his anger further. "Answer me or I'll kill you," he roared, unleashing a torrent of threats. Then he began beating her relentlessly, continuing for an entire hour. The woman lost consciousness, her limp body collapsing to the floor. Yet even this did not stop Park. He ordered his wife and Kim to drag her sister to the bathroom. Terrified, they obeyed. In the bathroom, Park turned on the cold shower and doused her with icy water, occasionally slapping her face. The woman remained unresponsive. Irritated, he muttered, "Apparently I'm not teaching properly," before leaving the bathroom. It seemed the beating had ended, but after some time, Park returned. In his hands were a Hosasan massager and a leather belt. What followed unfolded like a nightmare made real. Park used these items as a whip and a club, continuing his so-called procedure. The torment lasted 6 hours. The woman tried to endure it, but her body could no longer take the abuse. By 3 in the afternoon, her heart had stopped. Park calmly checked to see if she was still alive, and upon confirming her death, made a phone call to her younger brother. "Your sister is dead. You'll need to come tomorrow," he said in a completely emotionless tone. The next day, on April 12, 2017, the brother, along with others, went to meet this monstrous leader. Park's wife and parents arrived at the commune to discuss what had happened. At that moment, Park made a shocking declaration. "This was God's judgment. Your sister has died, but there is no reason to mourn. I can bring her back to life." The absurd statement was accepted as truth by everyone present. To them, Park was a god, and no one had the courage to question his words. The commune had become his personal kingdom, where every word he uttered was treated as law. Park's mother suggested a burial site, in the mountains near Bonghwa. The group wasted no time putting the plan into action. Park placed the woman's body in the trunk of a car, and together, his parents, wife, and the deceased woman's brother and sister, they drove to the chosen location. They ventured deep into the mountains and buried the body. Kim, the deceased woman's sister, did not leave Park even after this horrific event. One might think her sister's death would have broken his hold over her, but she remained, continuing to live in the commune. Park's behavior, far from softening, became even more brutal and controlling. He now declared, "Your sister isn't coming back because you're not praying properly. If you were doing it right, she would have already risen. Pray harder." Kim, physically and emotionally exhausted, was gradually losing her strength. Guilt over her sister's death consumed her. She truly believed she was responsible. At the same time, she remained a victim of Park's relentless abuse. Doubts began to creep into her mind, but the realization that everything about this situation was profoundly wrong came too slowly. By the time her awareness started to surface, Park's cruelty and control had reached their peak. Kim increasingly thought about escaping, but fear of Park and his family, who kept her under strict control, prevented her from taking the decisive step. 2 long years passed. In July 2019, Kim finally saw an opportunity to flee. Park, now preoccupied with a new group of female followers, rarely visited the commune, and his grip weakened. On July 6th, Kim made her move. She escaped from the commune. Her first action was to find her brother and persuade him to leave the dangerous place with her. From that moment, their life on the run began. They hid in various locations across Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, terrified that Park would find them and kill them, just as he had done to their older sister. Each day they changed their lodging, living in constant fear, unable to find peace. Their flight lasted 13 days until they finally felt they had escaped his grasp. It was then that the brother and sister decided to head to Busan to start a new life. Even in Busan, fear and guilt over their sister's death haunted them. Finally, on July 25th, they gathered the courage to go to the police and file a report against Park. Shortly afterward, the police raided the commune, only to find Park still surrounded by his devoted followers. It seemed the truth was on the verge of being revealed, yet Park remained utterly composed, exuding an unnerving calmness. "I just wanted to help these people," Park declared. Then, completely unexpectedly, he accused Kim of murdering her sister. "She killed her sister. I was only trying to cover for her, which is why I helped bury the body. Now she's trying to pin it all on me to save her own skin," he said with unsettling confidence. As Park spoke, his parents, standing nearby, suddenly began backing up his claims, lending their support to his story. Even Park's wife took his side, insisting their guru was innocent and had been falsely accused. However, it wasn't long before police located the buried body in the mountains, and the evidence proving Park's guilt became overwhelming. The investigation conclusively revealed that Park was the murderer. The first court hearing took place on February 1st, 2018. Park was sentenced to 30 years in prison, while his parents and wife, who had helped conceal the body, received 3-year prison terms. Although Kim's brother and sister were recognized as victims, they could not escape punishment for their involvement in hiding the body. They were sentenced to 2 years and 6 months of imprisonment, suspended with a 4-year probation period. However, Park and his family immediately filed an appeal. During the second trial, an unexpected twist occurred. Park's wife suddenly changed her testimony and spoke out against him. She declared that Park was the mastermind, a self-proclaimed guru, and confirmed that he had committed the murder. It seemed that her new testimony would only strengthen the case against Park. But the opposite happened. The appellate court reduced Park's sentence from 30 years to 22 years in prison. The court justified its decision by deeming the murder unintentional and concluded that the original sentence was overly harsh. Additionally, the judges considered Park's alleged remorse as a mitigating factor. This ruling sparked outrage. Given Park's criminal history, which included 8 prior offenses, and the testimony of his own wife, which directly implicated him, many were left questioning, how could such a decision be possible? Did Park truly feel remorse? That remains uncertain. Analyzing the behavior of such gurus, several common traits emerge. Cult leaders possess exceptional oratory skills. They can captivate others with their words, and their charisma draws people in. This enables them to easily manipulate those who are struggling, emotionally vulnerable, or overly naive. Cult victims, on the other hand, are often in dire life situations, both psychologically and financially. Many of them are overly trusting, unaware of the dangers of the world, and inclined to rely on someone they perceive as stronger. It is precisely this dependence that makes them vulnerable to manipulative individuals. Asterisk asterisk. How to avoid the traps of cults. Asterisk asterisk. Punishing the leaders of such groups is undoubtedly important. However, if they had no followers to begin with, their power would simply vanish. This is why prevention is key. Educating people to critically evaluate those who promise salvation, especially when it involves financial contributions or demands for absolute devotion, is essential. To those watching this video, I want to say, don't let yourself be deceived. Behind the mask of a savior may lurk true evil. Always ask yourself, who are you really listening to? A story from the past. And now the second story, which is just as impactful. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about the first story in the comments. I'll make sure to read every response. The man currently being escorted by police officers just uttered the following words during an interrogation. "If I hadn't been caught, I probably would have killed one or two more people." These words were spoken with an utterly indifferent tone. And the person who said them is 25-year-old Kim Yoon-chul. He was an ordinary office worker with a rather sociable nature. Before his arrest, he worked at a company selling computer components, earned a stable salary, and was even preparing for his wedding. He had already met his fiancée's parents. Within his family, he was a caring son who respected his parents. And his criminal record? The only offense he had ever been held accountable for was a traffic violation in his teenage years, which resulted in a fine of 200,000 won. At first glance, no one would have ever suspected that Kim Yoon-chul was a ruthless serial killer. Yet he led a flawlessly double life. It all began on May 15, 2006. On that night, around 11:50 p.m., Kim Yoon-chul, having spent the evening drinking with a friend in Anyang, was making his way home when he happened to encounter a 22-year-old office worker by the last name of Yoon. With an exceedingly friendly expression, he offered, given the late hour, to give her a ride if they were headed in the same direction. With such a confident smile, Kim didn't seem like a significant threat to Yoon, and feeling at ease, she got into his car. But this was the beginning of a tragedy. After some time on the road, Kim Yoon-chul suddenly veered the car in a direction that did not align with Yoon's home. The surprised young woman asked where he was going, and at that moment, Kim's demeanor changed drastically. He drew a knife he had prepared in advance and began to threaten her. He then stopped the car in a deserted area and assaulted her. Afterward, taking her belongings and credit card from the terrified Yoon, he also extracted her PIN code. The thought hit him. Damn, she saw my face. Kim suddenly grabbed her underwear and shoved it into her mouth to silence her cries, then bound her with a nylon cord he had in the car. He wrapped her face with packing tape several dozen times, leading to her suffocation. She died without even being able to scream properly. The entire ordeal, from the abduction to the murder, took Kim less than 2 hours. In fact, from the moment the threats began, Yoon had attempted several times to call her boyfriend and the police on 112. The calls lasted between 3 to 10 seconds, but unfortunately, help did not arrive in time. Meanwhile, Kim Yoon-chul began searching for a place to conceal the body, driving around the city of Gunpo for an hour in search of a suitable spot. Eventually, he found an inconspicuous location behind Gyeongjong Station, a gap between the station and the road, where he hid Yoon's body. 2 days after the first killing, on May 17th, Kim Yoon-chul withdrew a total of 2.84 million won from Yoon's credit card in 13 transactions. Out of this sum, he gave his girlfriend 1 million won, as if out of some twisted sense of nobility, and spent another 700,000 won on a car loan payment. When withdrawing the money, he deliberately used the ATM at Sambong Station, a place always bustling with people, knowing in advance that the surveillance camera there was a fake and didn't actually record anything. Later, when the police checked the withdrawal records and attempted to obtain footage from the camera, they couldn't catch a glimpse of his face. At dawn on May 20th, 5 days after Yoon's murder, Kim Yoon-chul returned to the spot behind Gyeongjong Station where the body was hidden. It is believed that he set the body on fire, intending to completely erase any traces. The fire department responded to the call, discovering the charred remains, but visual identification was impossible. Later, through forensic examination, using fingerprints and past dental records, it was established that the remains belonged to the missing Yoon. Meanwhile, Kim Yoon-chol returned to his routine life. The day after the murder, he took the camera he had taken from the slain Yoon and went on a date with his girlfriend to a folk village. He actively photographed his girlfriend with that camera, then brought it to work, almost boastfully showing it to his colleagues. He photographed his coworkers and even took selfies. The murder, the date the following day, and then returning to work, this entire double life continued. On the night of June 9, 2006, at precisely 11:30 p.m., Kim Yoon-chol ventured out onto the streets once more, driving through the area near Sambong Station, hunting for a new victim. Eventually, his gaze settled on a 20-year-old college student with the surname Kim, who appeared somewhat vulnerable. Approaching her under the guise of offering assistance, he suggested giving her a ride home, given the lateness of the hour. She accepted, climbing into his car, and soon they were engaged in conversation. She spoke of her boyfriend, her life at university. It was casual chatter that stretched on for a lengthy hour and 40 minutes. At one point, she began speaking to a friend on the phone, mentioning only, "Oh, I'm on my way home." However, the facade soon shattered as Kim Yoon-chol revealed his true intentions. He began to make unwelcome advances towards her. Terrified, the young woman attempted to quickly escape the vehicle, but Kim Yoon-chol brandished a knife, threatening her. In a horrific turn of events, the 20-year-old Kim met the same brutal fate as Yoon before her. The reason was simple. She had seen his face. During later interrogations, Kim Yoon-chol claimed that at the time, Kim had no credit card on her, and only a meager 10,000 won in cash. He also insisted that she had fiercely resisted his attempt to violate her, leading him to abandon the effort. Nevertheless, the body of Kim, discovered later, bore unmistakable signs of assault. On July 3rd, 3 weeks after her disappearance, Kim's body was discovered nude, curled in a fetal position amidst the overgrowth near the cemetery in the Cheonggye-dong district of Uiwang. There was a deep slash on her thigh, as if inflicted by a sharp knife, her hands were bound, and her face was wrapped in tape. Kim Yoon-chol denied any post-mortem mutilation of the body, yet the autopsy results revealed that such wounds could not have been caused by insects or accidental circumstances. They were inflicted deliberately. With the discovery of the bodies of 2 women killed in a similar manner, panic began to spread throughout the area. These 2 murders occurred less than a month apart, and it became apparent that no one knew when and where the 3rd murder would occur, creating a dangerous situation. The 2 women were strangers to each other. There were no witnesses, no surveillance footage, no clues to track down the perpetrator. The police were facing serious challenges. And then a 3rd victim emerged. On July 1st, around 11 p.m., a 27-year-old woman by the surname Ho was returning home from the Sambong district in the city of Gunpo. Kim Yoon-chol seemed to feel a certain confidence, believing he had executed the previous 2 murders perfectly. Thus, this time he acted even more audaciously. It is known that serial killers grow bolder and more vicious with each crime. This was precisely what happened with Kim Yoon-chol. This time, he immediately used force to compel Ho into his car. He then killed her in the same manner as his previous victims and disposed of her body. But this time, he took one item from the slain Ho, a Gucci handbag, a woman's handbag, and Kim gifted this bag to his girlfriend. It's simply shocking. Meanwhile, the police, who were on the hunt for a serial killer, decided to employ a clever tactic. The criminal was aware that the ATM camera, from which he withdrew money using the card of his first victim, Yoon, did not record video. This was precisely why he chose to withdraw money there. The police speculated that he might use the same location again to withdraw money from the cards of other victims. They promptly replaced the camera with a fully functioning one and waited. Their hunch proved correct. Kim Yoon-chol returned to that very spot with the credit card of his 3rd victim, Ho. This occurred 2 days after her disappearance on July 3rd, even before her body was discovered. The camera captured Kim Yoon-chol withdrawing 1.2 million won from her card. The police swiftly identified him and managed to apprehend Kim early the following morning in the parking lot near his home. Upon his arrest, Kim Yoon-chol vehemently denied his involvement in the crimes. Despite the fact that his face was caught on the ATM camera and the police already had evidence in hand, he insisted, "It wasn't me." However, a decisive piece of evidence soon emerged that broke his resistance: the results of a DNA analysis conducted by the National Forensic Service. Well, the DNA matched perfectly. Only then did Kim Yoon-chul begin to confess to his crimes, but even then, it wasn't the whole truth. As previously mentioned, at the time of his arrest, the body of the third victim, Ho, had not yet been found. Kim Yoon-chul remained obstinately silent about Ho's fate. Despite the fact that the last card used belonged to her, he refused to answer any of the police's questions about her whereabouts or what had happened to her. However, eventually, just an hour before the press conference on July 5th at 2 p.m., Kim Yoon-chul requested a meeting with the investigator and confessed to killing Ho and disposing of her body. The police immediately identified the location and headed there. That very day, in the thickets near Baekwoon Lake in the city of Uiwang, Ho's body was discovered. Her body bore signs of assault. Thus, within 46 days, 3 murders of women in the Gunpo and Anyang areas, committed by Kim Yoon-chul, were solved. By day, he appeared to be an ordinary office worker, a caring son, and a gentle boyfriend. But by night, he stalked women, raped them, and brutally killed them by wrapping their faces with tape. And yet, as mentioned earlier, he had no criminal record. However, labeling his actions as rookie crimes was impossible. His method was too brutal. The police were left wondering how a person could suddenly transform into such a violent criminal and what had triggered it. According to Kim Yoon-chul himself, he was drowning in credit card debt to the tune of 10 million won, and he claimed his criminal activities were a desperate measure to tackle this issue. But was this the whole truth? At the time, his annual income was around 28 million won, and his parents were financially stable. In the months leading up to his crimes, he even purchased a car in his father's name. Kim Yoon-chul stated that he was shelling out approximately 1.6 million won each month to cover the car loan and to chip away at his credit card debt, leaving him strapped for cash. Previously, he managed to scrape by borrowing money, but he reached a breaking point and decided he could no longer go on that way, leading him to commit these offenses. But let's pause for a moment. If his motives were purely financial, why then did he rape his victims? The answer to this unsettling question began to emerge during the search of his home. Investigators uncovered several dozen pornographic materials, which made his proclivities glaringly apparent. The majority of the videos depicted women bound with tape or subjected to coercion and violence, along with scenes where women were in pain and unwilling to engage in sexual acts. Based on these finds, the police surmised that Kim Yoon-chul was enthralled by sadistic sexual acts and used these materials to fuel his criminal fantasies. Furthermore, during his childhood, he harbored feelings of injustice, believing his mother consistently favored his older brother. This may have sown the seeds of a latent hatred toward women, which festered and grew over the years. Though Kim Yoon-chul maintained that his crimes were driven by financial woes, the sheer brutality of his actions suggested otherwise, prompting a myriad of theories and analyses regarding his true motives. This meant that his cruelty was excessive. Moreover, Kim Yoon-chul himself dared to say, "If I hadn't been caught, I probably would have killed 1 or 2 more people every month." This suggests that his motives likely extended far beyond money and were tied to an abnormal sexual obsession, or even a passion for the very act of killing. In fact, Kim Yoon-chul admitted that with each murder, he became more engrossed in his crimes. After the first one, he didn't realize it yet, but upon killing the second victim, he experienced an indescribable thrill. So, did he show any signs of remorse during the investigation? No. He said, "I feel sorry for the victims, but I was only concerned about the consequences for myself. I was afraid that if my girlfriend, colleagues, friends, or family found out about my crimes, it would harm me, and therefore I couldn't act otherwise." Doesn't that statement seem incredibly self-centered? Kim Yoon-chul thought only of his own interests and showed absolutely no empathy for the victims he killed without any reason, whose deaths were so unjust. In fact, the most chilling aspect of this case was his double life. After the murders, he photographed his girlfriend with the victim's camera, flaunted this camera in front of his colleagues, and even gifted his girlfriend a Gucci bag he took from the third victim. Such a duplicitous nature. No one would ever want to have such a person around. But precisely because of this, no one could have imagined that he was a serial killer. Let's sum it up. After extensive legal proceedings in June 2007, the Supreme Court sentenced Kim Yun-chul to life imprisonment. He has now spent 16 years behind the cold prison walls. Technically, he has the opportunity to apply for parole starting in 2026. But given the severity of his crimes, it's said that his chances are exceedingly slim. Throughout his arrest and the entire trial, Kim Yun-chul reportedly showed little remorse. His apologies to the press appeared more formal than genuine. Yet even if he spends the rest of his life in prison, will he ever truly grasp the horror and fear experienced by the 3 women he killed in their final moments? 16 years have passed, and it's uncertain if anything has changed. One can only hope that he lives each day fully aware of the gravity of his crimes, earnestly repenting,